You're trying to get a gaming rig that actually lets you sit down, fire up a game, and not spend the whole night tweaking settings or worrying you bought the wrong thing. That it just works feeling is what most of us are after, something reliable, easy to live with day to day, and worth the cash, not a fancy spec sheet that looks great on paper but falls apart in the real world. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I know the hesitation. You've probably seen a dozen pre-built towers that promise ultra-high frame rates and future-proof performance, yet the reviews are a mixed bag, and the return policy can feel like a gamble. When you're looking at a machine like the Ocean Park White gaming PC, you're weighing the convenience of a ready-to-play system against the risk of overpaying for a brand you don't know. I dug into the specs, skimmed the 4.3-star rating from 64 buyers, and read the little comments that mention things like quiet enough for roommates and solid out of the box. Here's what I found when I imagined actually using this PC in a typical setup. First off, let's talk about the daily experience. The tower comes pre-assembled in the USA, which means you won't be wrestling with a bunch of loose components and a confusing manual. You pop it out of the box, plug the power cord, hook up your monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and Windows 11 is already installed. For someone who just wants to start playing Cyberpunk 2077 or Elden Ring without a week of driver hunting, that's a huge plus. The 360mm AIO water cooler does a decent job of keeping the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D temperatures low enough that you can game for hours without the CPU throttling. In practice, I've seen users report stable 70-80C temps during marathon sessions, which is comfortable for both performance and longevity. Now, performance-wise, the combo of an 8-core 3-catch-rich Ryzen processor and an RTX 5070 Ti GPU translates to strong frame rates at 1440p and respectable 4K numbers on titles that aren't insanely demanding. If you're the type who plays a mix of fast shooters and open-world RPGs, the CPU's extra cache helps with those pop-in texture loads you hate in sprawling games. Real-world testers have mentioned that the game never stutters even when they have several background apps like Discord and Spotify running. That's the practical side of the high-end specs claim. Storage is another place where the Ocean Park wins. 2TB 1TB of PCIe NVMe speed plus a secondary 1TB SATA drive mean you can keep your OS and most played titles on the fastest drive while still having a big room for a growing library. In everyday use, that cuts load times down to a few seconds. One reviewer said they could jump from the desktop into Fortnite in under 3 seconds, which is a noticeable improvement over older builds that still rely on a single slower drive. The 32GB of DDR5 RAM running at 6000 MHz is also overkill for most gamers, but it future-proofs the system for upcoming titles that start to push memory bandwidth. If you also dabble in content creation, editing videos, or rendering 3D models, that extra RAM becomes a tangible benefit, letting you keep a large timeline open while the game runs in the background. Now for the trade-offs. The first thing most buyers notice is the price tag. Pre-built rigs with this level of hardware aren't cheap, and you're essentially paying a premium for the convenience factor and the brand's assembly service. If you're comfortable building your own PC, you could probably shave a few $100s by sourcing parts yourself and opting for a standard air cooler instead of a 360mm AIO. That said, the water cooling isn't just a flashy add-on, it does reduce noise compared to a stock air cooler. In a typical apartment setting, the fans stay in a low hum zone, which many users have praised as quiet enough for late-night gaming without waking the roommate. Another practical consideration is upgradability. The case is a fairly large tower with a striking white finish, which looks great on a desk but also means you need enough floor space. Internally, the motherboard is likely a series model that will handle the current components but may not have room for, say, a second GPU or a larger storage array without some tinkering. If you plan to upgrade to a next-gen GPU in a few years, you'll want to check the power supply's connectors and the case's airflow path. The 850W PSU is generous for now, but you'll still be limited by the motherboard's PCIe lane configuration. Software-wise, the PC ships with a proprietary RGB Fusion 2.0 app that lets you control lighting and fan curves. It works, but it's not the most polished UI. You'll find some users have reported occasional crashes when adjusting settings on the fly. It's a minor inconvenience, but if you're someone who likes to tinker with fan curves daily, you might find yourself reaching for a third-party tool like MSI Afterburner instead. Who should buy this? If you're a gamer who wants a high-end experience.